Hello, I am Miriam Lang from Universidad Andina Simón Bolívar in Quito, Ecuador. In this video, I will give you a brief overview of my article, Degrowth, Global Asymmetries and Ecosocial Justice, Decolonial Perspectives from Latin America. In the broader context of ecological breakdown, this paper attempts to sketch out some strengths and weaknesses of degrowth, considering the task to bring about a globally just ecosocial transformation. It also explores possibilities of a cross-fertilization between degrowth debates and some debates within IR for this purpose. In the article, I draw on the Latin American tradition of dependency theory, on a decade of debates in the Latin American Working Group on Alternatives to Development, which I am part of, and on recent research on the geopolitics of green colonialism in the context of the need for ecosocial transitions. As a scholar activist of German nationality based in Latin America since 2003, my methodological approach would be best described as participatory action research, a collaborative, problem-oriented approach to knowledge production that focuses on achieving positive social change. My point of departure in this paper is that degrowth literature predominantly states that degrowth strategies are meant from and for the global north. Economic mainstream discourse suggests that the global south still has to grow in terms of achieving development. From a slightly different perspective, degrowth proponents expect a reduction of material and energy throughput in the global north to, quote, make ecological and conceptual space, end of quote, for the global south. They claim that this is the precondition for the global south to find its own paths toward ecosocial transformation. In the article, I take a critical stance on these assumptions. The paper builds on three main arguments. First, I critically discuss the assumption that the global south needs to grow while the north needs to degrow from different angles, including that of dependency. For example, I show how most economic growth in Latin America in the last decades has been achieved through extractivism, which is not only depredated nature, but also contributed to a future concentration of wealth, exacerbating inequalities instead of increasing well-being. Second, I summarize existing resonances, dialogues, and engagements between degrowth as a movement and as a research agenda, and alternative paradigms that have emanated from the global south. For example, living well or summa causae. And I explore some possibilities for a cross-fertilization between degrowth and IR scholarship. And third, I highlight the limitations of the claim that degrowth in the north will open space for the south, pointing out that the need to call into question the deep structural inequalities and injustices inscribed into the existing international trade and financial systems. I argue that overcoming those is a precondition for the global south to thrive, and point at some debates within IR which could be beneficial in this context. For example, those who take up the need for a new international economic order today, learning from the experiences of the 1970s, or those who discuss the limitations of global environmental governance. Because of these structural asymmetries, I argue that to make ecological and conceptual space for the global south through degrowth in the global north is not enough. A sudden reduction of demand in raw materials might even lead to catastrophic recession in the south if structural global interdependencies and asymmetries are not addressed. If the degrowth movement wants to engage with the global south in a decolonial way, it must build North-South alliances around an ecosocial project that tackles the unjust global governance structures and envisions global justice in both symbolic and very material terms. On the other hand, being one of the few voices in the global north that questions the logic of green growth and claims structural changes, advocating for a thorough redistribution of wealth, for example, degrowth is predestined to be part of both research and political alliances to such ends, but only if it opens up to a real dialogue with movements in the global south that goes beyond conceptual convergences and engages in strategies for a structural change of the existing asymmetric international relations. I hope that if you have watched this video to this point, I have managed to raise your interest to read the full article in the Review of International Studies. Thank you very much for your attention.